Why don't we start where we kind of finished right there? We're talking about defense stocks. So the president wants to see defense spending jump pretty much to record levels, 50% higher by 2027. When we're talking about Capitol Hill, what kind of appetite is there for that?
I'll tell you, I mean, I think with this idea as well as some of the other things you mentioned, you really have to think it in two ways. One, like, is this a good idea that will accomplish the administration's goals? And two, is it sort of, legally sustainable? Is it sustainable in Congress? I think that these are always the questions. Now, on the defense bit of it, one, on increasing the Pentagon's budget by 50%, one, is that fiscally sustainable given the U.S. is at a very high level of debt right now? I mean, the tariffs aren't going to pay for this. The tariffs have been paying for things about 5 times over, and they're not going to bring in as much money. Oh, and by the way, the Supreme Court might be about to throw out those tariffs or a good chunk of them. Right. So like where that money's going to come from is really is kind of a sketchy at this point. And is this like a good idea? I understood that the administration wanted to draw in sort of more new companies and startups into the defense sector. And if you're saying, oh, by the way, we're going to limit the pay and we're going to make it harder for you to raise capital, to me, those things seem to be working at cross purposes.
Jimmy, I can't tell which one you're more fired up about, the housing part of this, the defense part about it. You answered my questions about the tariffs in the Supreme Court. I mean, that seemed to be kind of what the president was hinging this on, the idea that tariffs are going to pay for this increase in spending because we all know about the deficit and some of the issues there. All right, I want to go back to housing. You're also pretty fired up about that. I think that is a big question. I mean, is this legal? We had a housing analyst on just a short time ago saying about 3% of the houses out there are owned by large investors and institutional buyers. He's not sure it would create the liquidity I think the president isn't imagining, but I want to get back to the legality. When we're talking about Capitol Hill, does the president have support for this kind of populist agenda, specifically one that kind of takes away some agency from corporations and just kind of takes away, I would think, some of what we like to see as the free market system?
Well, listen, also, first of all, the Congress today might change into a different Congress after the midterm elections. So that's an issue. Two, again, I think a lot about like what's going on with the tariffs. You can sign executive orders, but eventually, like these things are going to be litigated, and especially something like this, as well as with the defense industry. And I think that creates a tremendous amount of uncertainty. I would have deep questions, one about the legality. And listen, I think it's fairly well known, finally it has penetrated policymakers, that the U.S. housing problem is a supply problem. We don't build enough housing. So I think that would weigh on the mind of Congress. And unfortunately, that is primarily a state and local issue. And I understand that Washington wants to do something about housing. Well, the best thing it can do is make sure that we're not running an inflationary budget, keep interest rates down. And then it's really going to take states to make those changes to create more housing supply. It is a supply problem, not a private equity problem, where the evidence there is really light, to be charitable.
Jimmy, you just alluded to the midterm elections, the idea that we might see some changes coming up in Congress. I do want to say, though, this seems to be a bipartisan issue about housing affordability. And this populist agenda, is there any potential that it may actually appeal to some of the other people on the other side of the aisle, and the idea of freeing up more housing and not having corporations own housing? Because that's something that certainly on social media, and if you kind of talk to people anecdotally, a lot of people feel like corporations are really at least one source of the increase in housing prices.
Both on limiting CEO pay in the defense industry and, limiting dividends and buybacks, as well as in housing and trying to limit the role of private equity. Both those are issues which you can easily imagine a Democratic president coming up with. Both those issues broadly are the kinds of things Democrats have typically talked about over the past decade. And I realize that blaming private equity for housing, listen, probably like you, I'm on social media considerably, and I see that issue coming up again and again. But I think the data isn't there. Private equity buys, a lot of homes, though less lately. They also sell a lot of homes, and there's really no causal relationship. You can't find it in the data between the share of homes owned by private equity and what's happening with prices in a particular region. They're an easy target, and I guess attacking them would be easier than actually changing land use regulation and zoning laws in cities. But that's where the problem is. It's not with private equity. of a popular and populist, argument.